I want to welcome everybody. My name is Kent Hutchison. I'm president of the Lone Star Rotary E Club of Texas, and we have an exciting program tonight. This is our regular meeting night. We meet on the first and third Thursdays of the month. We are an E Club based in District 5910. We have members from all over the state of Texas, and actually, we're a global club. We like to call ourselves a VIP club. That means we're Rotarians, virtual in person. And we do have meetings twice a month and have great speakers. We do service projects, and we're very excited about tonight's presentation because about twice a year we bring in a VIP speaker. And tonight you're going to be very impressed with our VIP speaker, and more about that in a few moments. But we are a Rotary Club. We're about service above self, and I want to encourage you to check us out on our Facebook page, our website, as well as our YouTube channel, where we have all of our programs that are posted each week or each month. And that's where they're at tonight. And at this time, I'd like to turn this over as we talk about our four-way test. We talk about the service of Rotary and the object of Rotary. We'll talk about that after the presentation tonight. And but I'm going to turn it over to Karen Chapman, who is our program chair. Karen, I understand you've arranged a pretty significant speaker for us tonight. Will you tell us about our speaker?
I certainly will, and I'm so happy to. Thank you, President Kent. Anybody who's on this call has probably heard of our speaker tonight. And as a traveler myself, I never dreamed that the speaker would actually come to our club and speak to us about the lovely thing called travel. In researching him and looking at his bio, I learned a lot about Rick Steves, and he has a lot in common with Rotary, more than you can imagine. He's a philanthropist. He wants to connect the globe. And I think rather than read his bio, which we usually do, I was most struck by the mission statement of his company. And I would like to read that. And social responsibility is not an add-on to Rick Steves' company's mission. It is at its core. Their mission at Rick Steves Europe is to inspire, inform, and equip Americans to have European trips that are fun, affordable, and culturally broadening. We value travel as a powerful way to better understand and contribute to the world in which we live. We strive to keep our own travel style, our world outlook, and our business practices consistent with these travels. And apart from being the good of travel itself, Rick Steves and his company and its employees engage in several areas of activism and philanthropy to help bring about greater social good. Now, that to me sounds like a great Rotarian, and you're a perfect match to be talking to us tonight. With that, I would like to introduce you to Rick Steves.
Thank you, Karen, very much. It's so nice to be with you, and what a treat to be invited to your virtual club all over Texas and share some lessons I've learned from my travels. I understand I've got about, I think, 40 or 45 minutes where I can talk, and then Karen will come back onto the virtual stage and we will have a Q&A session. And that's a chance to get to know each other a little better and to make sure I answer what you're thinking about. But right now, what I want to do is just get into my PowerPoint and share with you why travel is something that I think is more valuable than ever. I've spent my entire career teaching people how to travel. My beat is Europe, but I find myself thinking about traveling everywhere. And I'm going to talk about how some of my travels beyond Europe have been the most influential and valuable to me over the years. Now, I'm going to be talking today about a talk that could be called Travel as a Political Act. Travel that broadens your perspective, travel that lets you understand the other 96% of humanity outside of our borders, and travel that's sort of inspired by this idea that Thomas Jefferson said, don't tell me, what did he say? Thomas Jefferson said, travel makes a person wiser, if less happy. And why would you want to be wiser, if less happy? Because I want to be engaged in the world. I want to be contributing to the good in the world. I want to realize that there is humanity within and without when you look at this world as an American. And when I travel, I like to bring home the most important souvenir, and that's a broader perspective. So when I think about travel, first of all, my beat is Europe. I've written 60 or 80 books about traveling in Europe. For me, Europe is the wading pool for world exploration. And in my business, that's the big market. That's my expertise. I've spent 100 days a year ever since I was a college kid in Europe, making mistakes, taking careful notes. When I get ripped off, I celebrate. They don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and I'm going to pack it into my lectures or my TV show or my books so other people can learn from my experience rather than their own and have a better trip. That's what I'm all about. I'm your globe-trotting guinea pig. And while my favorite country is India, not Europe, I think of Europe as sort of the wading pool for world exploration. And we like to joke at our company that our mission, beyond what Karen just read, is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. Nothing wrong with Orlando, but frankly, that's La La Land, and there's a lot of reality out there that we could benefit from getting to know in a first-hand way. Now, I've been teaching like a madman. Everywhere I go, I love to teach travel, and I've had 40 years of an evolution in my message. It's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs. When I started, it was the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs, the skills, the basic skills. How do you catch the train? How do you pack light? How do you find a hotel and get a good dinner? That's in my guidebook, Europe Through the Back Door. And then after that, I was really thinking, you can buy the book and learn that. Let's talk about art and history and culture and cuisine and understanding the people. And that's my whole program, Europe 101, History and Art for Travelers. And then in the last 20 or 25 years, my passion has been the pinnacle of that hierarchy of travel needs. And that's what I call travel as a political act. Getting out of your comfort zone, recognizing that you can oftentimes learn more about your own home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. I love that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you wish I was going to be talking about the skills of European travel, boy, there's a lot to talk about there. One of my favorite things to do is help prepare people for their travels. Just a couple of months ago, my neighbors were heading off to Europe, and they were going to take one of our tours, but they had a few days before the tour started, and I sat down with them and helped them plan their free time, and it reminded me how important it is to take that planning part of your trip and take it to heart and be well prepared. Well, that's just a matter of being a good student. I could talk all day about these topics, trip planning, packing, safety, communication, transportation, eating, sleeping, and avoiding crowds, but that's what's all available for free at my website at ricksteves.com. As far as art goes, I'm so committed to this notion that the more understanding you bring to your sightseeing, the more you'll get out of it. And I've worked really hard to teach the art of Europe. In fact, I've spent several years since COVID working on a 6-hour sweep through the story of European art for TV. It's our public television series called Art of Europe. And we talk about clever ways to learn and appreciate art. If you want to go to a Gothic cathedral, why don't you build a Gothic cathedral out of people first? It takes 13 tourists to build a Gothic cathedral. 6 columns, 6 buttresses, and a mighty spire. Exactly what can we learn from the value of pointed arches instead of round arches and flying buttresses instead of conventional buttresses? Well, that's all the little details. And if you understand the magic of Gothic, the triumph of the High Middle Ages, you can step into a Gothic church, excitedly nudge your partner and say, isn't this a marvelous improvement over Romanesque? Imagine getting turned on by Gothic. Well, that's the kind of fun we have. We share it in our TV program, and you can watch all of that for free on my website. So I'm sort of cross-promoting a few sources of information that are free for you. If you want to hear a 1-hour lecture on the skills of European travel, that's actually a TV show that's airing all over the country on public television right now. And that is available on our website. It's called Experiencing Europe. If you want the art, you've got those 6 hours of art shows that take you from the pyramids to Picasso. But what I want to talk about right now with our time together is that pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs. Ever since I was a kid, I've been traveling, and I have learned that when we get away from home, that's when we sort of carbonate our life. And we gain a better understanding. Perhaps the greatest eureka in my travel career was on my very first trip. I was visiting relatives in Norway with my mom and dad. I was just 14 years old. We were behind the palace in Oslo in this park, Frogner Park. I remember my parents were just loving me ridiculously, and I just was a high maintenance pill. and they were taking me to Europe at great expense and a great compromise to what they would experience on their long dreamed of trip to Europe. They didn't have a lot of money. This was a big deal from them, and they took me along. I thought they're loving me illogically. And then I looked around that park and I saw it speckled with other families, parents loving their kids just as much as my parents loved me. And it occurred to me as a goofy little, egocentric teeny bopper, wow, this world is home to billions of equally lovable little children of God. What a revelation! There is so much love on this planet. And it reminded me, wow, we are all worthy of that love. And from a Christian point of view, if you believe in God, whatever religion you are, if you believe in God, hey, that means we're all children of God. And that makes us all brothers and sisters. And that means when you travel, you get to know the family. And that means that suffering across the sea is no less than suffering across the street. Imagine that concept. If we're children of God, suffering has nothing to do with proximity. That's why Thomas Jefferson said travel makes a person wiser, if less happy. So I've been burdened with these wonderful revelations in my travel. And now when I travel, I want my window down. I want to get my fingers dirty in the local culture. I want to connect. I want to get out of my comfort zone. A lot of people try to avoid culture shock. But to me, culture shock is a good thing. It's constructive. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. And it needs not to be avoided, but culture shock needs to be curated. That's what I do as a tour guide and a travel writer and so on. And we in our travels can eagerly find culture shock and grow because of that. For me, as a teacher, I love the idea that travel can be being a tourist, you can be a traveler, or you can be a pilgrim. Think about that. If you're a tourist, you're just out having fun. That's great. Nothing wrong with it. You're on vacation. If you're a traveler instead of a tourist, you're learning. You're experiencing things that are new. You're getting out of your comfort zone. You're learning about the world. You're getting more comfortable with the world. And if you travel as a pilgrim, that's transformational travel. That's really, really learning about yourself by leaving your comfort zone. So the road can be playground. The road can be school. And I love the idea that the road can be church or synagogue or mosque. Now, you don't need to be hedonistic and it's just fun in the sun and frequent flyer miles and, duty-free shopping. And you don't need to be purely a monk. You can be a mix. And the great news is you get to calibrate that. How much pilgrim do you want? How much traveler? How much tourist do you want? I find it's more rewarding to err on the side of traveler and pilgrim, but that's the beautiful thing. Take advantage of that opportunity to mix it up and put a little traveler into your tourism. Put a little pilgrim into your tourism. One way to have a more transformational trip is to meet people. I don't want to see tired cliches of the culture on stage. I want to meet the people. And the easiest way to meet the people, and by the way, my beat is Europe, so I'll be talking about Europe. But these ideas could apply to traveling anywhere, is to remember that in the early evening, people love to get out and stroll. That's called the paseo or the passeggiata. And the first thing I ask at the hotel after how do I get on the Wi-Fi, is where do people get out and stroll? Be there, make the scene, connect with people. One of my favorite countries is Ireland, because in Ireland, I enjoy the sensation of understanding a foreign language. Ha! People have this wonderful gift of gab and this great lilt, and they love to talk. If you meet these guys on your trip to the west coast of Ireland, I'm talking way over in the west, where you stand on the bluff and you gaze out at the Atlantic and they say, the next parish over is Boston. If you meet people there that want to talk, your itinerary does not matter. This is what it's all about. Stop, get to know them. This is travel. I'll never forget talking to these guys. After a while, I asked the guy on the left, were you born here? He said, no, it was about 5 miles down the road. Ha! I asked him later, have you lived here all your life? He said, not yet. It's so fun to meet the people. That's the mark of a good traveler. How do you meet the people? You're hiking along the Riviera in Italy. You step into an abbey. You meet the monk who runs the place. He invites you into the abbey to have some of his homemade limoncello. What do you say when a monk invites you to have his homemade limoncello in his abbey with a view of the Riviera? You say yes. When serendipity presents itself, the good traveler's answer is yes. Get tipsy with a monk in Italy. That's a great experience. Get out of your comfort zone. For me, as a tour guide, one of my great joys is getting people to try new things. You need to order your food, simple as that is, with a spirit of adventure. When you're in France, you got to try escargot. When I crossed the border as one of our Rick Steves bus tours from Switzerland to France, I'm so excited for that first night at the restaurant because with 24 people in my group, I'll order 24 escargot. Everybody tries one. You've got to try one. You don't need to like it, but you don't know what escargot is unless you've eaten it in France. Everybody tries it. Some people wiggle their noses. At the end of it, they'll never do that again. Other people try it, wiggle their noses, but then they go, hey, that was pretty good. And the next night when they have a free dinner, they actually order half a dozen escargot snails for their own. And that's a luxury. When we travel, we try new things, we get out of our comfort zone, we become cultural chameleons. Chameleons, I physically change from country to country to adapt what locals are doing. Chocolate's not a big deal for me unless I'm in Belgium. That's when I get serious about chocolate. And in any town, I'll find the beloved woman whose family has brought quality chocolate to that community for generations. I'll let her show off. I'll try her best. I'll buy a little box, a mixed treat box, and I'm enjoying and appreciating the greatest chocolate in the world. I don't go all the way to Europe to order my favorite drink from back home. I hope you don't. When I'm in the Greek Isles, I don't let a day go by without having a glass of ouzo. Now in Seattle where I live, I never work all day long and go home and crave a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. I don't even like the taste of it in this hemisphere. But on a Greek island, again, you just don't want to let the sun go down without grabbing a perch like this and sipping the drink that everybody else is sipping, a beautiful ouzo. I don't drink whiskey unless I'm in Scotland. I've never brewed a pot of tea properly in this hemisphere, but in England, I don't let a day go by without a spot of tea. I've never had a beer in Tuscany because I want that good, full-bodied red wine. And I've never had a red wine in Czech Republic because I want the best beer in Europe. Eat what the locals are eating. Drink what the locals are drinking. You don't want to be ethnocentric, and you know what ethnocentric means. You don't want to think you're the norm. I don't care how big your state is, you are not the norm. People who sit on a toilet are the oddballs on this planet, and it's exciting to get out there and learn that, okay? We are inclined to think we're the norm because we're a big country, and you're a big state. That's fun. But it's so exciting to realize when you travel that other people find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. So you want to get over ethnocentrism, and you want to get over chronocentrism. And this is relating to this modern super political correctness that we've got now, that we are so tuned into these thoughtful approaches to being more sensitive to our neighbors. And it's a beautiful thing, I think, in our generation. But I don't want to lay my sensibilities from 2025 onto people who lived centuries ago. That to me is called chronocentrism. I don't want to judge the past on today's sensibilities. Now, of course, I want to strive to be thoughtful and inclusive and equitable and all of that. But I've got to remember, in the past, people were not as evolved that way. We've come a long way. We've got a long way to go. But when I travel, I don't bog down on today's judgments on that when I'm looking at things that happened centuries ago. When I step into the greatest church in Christendom, for years when I went into this church, St. Peter's at the Vatican, I was a little bit upset. I was kind of angry. Who paid for this stuff? And what are all these saints doing here? And, I was just an angry Protestant. And then I realized, hey, Rick, park your Lutheran sword at the door. Come into this church as a temporary Roman Catholic, and your travels will go much better. And I did that years ago, and it's one of the greatest things, and I love it. I'm so thankful for that. Don't be chronocentric. Don't look at this through some hip person from the 21st century. Look at it from 500 years ago. And remember, this was the greatest way people way back then could glorify God. And it is quite an accomplishment if you look at it that way. Try to see it through contemporaneous eyes, and your sightseeing will be, I think, much more valuable. And know what you're looking at. If you go to St. Peter's Basilica, you see a guy with a bushy beard and a big key. That's got to be St. Peter. And if you look in that from the tomb of St. Peter, and you look up into the dome, taller than a football field on end, designed by Michelangelo 500 years ago, you see in 6-foot tall mosaic letters, Tu es Petrus. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Well, of course, Peter was martyred right there at a Roman racecourse track 2,000 years ago, and he was buried by his followers on a humble little cemetery on the hill nearby, the Vatican Hill. For 300 years, people worshipped under the cover of dark on Peter's tomb. And then Emperor Constantine became a Christian in about 312. Suddenly, Christianity became legal and people could worship there, and they built a big church. And that is the reason Peter, considered the first pope, is so important in the Catholic faith. This is the most holy and sacred spot for 1 billion Roman Catholic Christians. And when I go in there, I want to get into it on their terms. I was just in Oslo a few months ago, and the big new thing on the harbor front there is this smiling bench. And this is right in front of the Nobel Peace Prize Center, because of course they offer the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo. There's a statement in the pavement right in front of that bench that says the greatest weapon is talking to each other. It's by Nelson Mandela. And the bench is all about you cannot sit on the smiling bench without coming together. The idea that the world can come together through travel, and then we can talk to each other and not be afraid of each other. I just love that. And what greater place to put that than in front of where the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded. Here in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, where you can see half of the entire population of the island from the top of that church spire. You've got the rainbow, for the inclusivity of everybody in the community in the street. And you see a lot of that all over Europe these days. Rainbow flags, rainbow colors, painted there during some gay pride parade, and they've decided to leave it there all the time. When I was walking home from that church, I noticed that in Iceland, the swing set is not a straight line with everybody swinging parallel like when I was a kid, but it's a circle. And people, the children, swing together. They come together and they giggle and they kick each other's feet. And to me, it was just emblematic of a society that values community. I just love that focus on community. That's such a big deal that I find in my travels through Europe. I love this shot because these are 3 girls in Iran loving their gelato or their ice cream. And when I looked at those smiles and those happy eyes and them eagerly licking the drips on their ice cream cones, it occurred to me, yep, kids all over the world love ice cream the same. I just take that to heart. When you travel, when you have joy, when you love your grandchild, kids all over the world are just like that. Here in the United States, we love our liberty, but there are places that love their liberty just as much. In fact, there's a place in Europe that thinks it's got more liberty than we do, the hometown of Salvador Dali, Cadaqués, in Spain. And when you go there, it's just a lot of fun. I just love Dali's hometown. But when I travel in Europe, I celebrate that. Of course, it's my beat. I love European lifestyles and so on. In Italy, in the north, there's a town that has a festival every summer where the older kids teach the younger kids how to make a nice ravioli. It's just woven into the community that the young kids learn grandma's recipe for the ravioli, and it keeps the culture alive. At a humble little city hall or chamber of commerce in a valley where they make some beautiful wine in Burgundy in France, they've pooled their resources and made these glass orbs where people can appreciate the fine bouquet of the different wines they grow in that valley. They're so proud of what they produce, and they want us to appreciate that and maybe buy a bottle. I love how Europeans pay too much for their bread, willingly, knowingly, in order to buy it from the person who baked it. That's a beautiful thing. Of course, in the United States, we aspire to have a freezer in the garage, so we only have to go shopping every couple of weeks to take advantage of the economy of a big box store. Europeans would rather have a little refrigerator under the sink, so they have to go to the market every morning and connect in with their neighbors. It's not right or wrong. It's just fun when you're traveling to realize that smart people do things differently. And that's how I am constantly humbled with my ethnocentrism. I'm so into efficiency. I'm so American that way. I want the economy of scale. Europeans, they have their own family values, and that includes checking in with their neighbors and being connected with their community, and buying their bread from the person who baked it. Europeans love their fine wine, and they know where to fill it up cheap. My goodness, the cheapest liquid you can buy in Tuscany is table wine. It's actually a filling station. A couple times a year, people pull in with their car filled with empty jugs, and they fill them all up with the wine, and that makes them very happy. I love to compare European society with American society. We're like sister societies, and we can learn a lot from each other. And one thing is we can learn from history. I know that a lot of Americans don't really understand how Europeans appreciate us and how they value us to be at the table, but they do. I was filming in Europe, in France, a few years ago, and in a beautiful little mom and pop chateau. We were going to include it in our TV show. We were late, the sun was going down. I got there and I said, "Can we get up on the rooftop, please, and take a wide shot of the castle before the sun goes down?" "Oh, no, we must first have a glass of wine." "No, no, no. I'd love to have a glass of wine, but the sun's going down. Let me just get up on top and take that photograph first, and then we'll come down and have some wine." Nope. We had to have our little party first. So they brought out a glass of wine and the cheese and the crackers, and then, as if bringing out a religious relic, the children of that aristocratic family brought out the precious 48-star American flag, and they unfurled it before us, and then they explained, "This is the flag that we hoisted over our village that day in 1945 when we were liberated from Nazi tyranny. And we will never let Americans into our castle without bringing out our flag and thanking them for the valor and the courage and the strength and the commitment to democracy and freedom to liberate us from Nazi tyranny." And they said, "Please go home and tell your friends and neighbors that in France we will forever be thankful for America and what it's done through the years." Now, we don't recognize that very much, but there are a lot of people in Europe who were born in the late 1940s named Johnny and Frankie. And every time I meet a person in that age group named Johnny or Frankie, I talk to them because their parents named them that because they were so inspired by American GIs that they had met after winning and finishing World War II. It's so exciting for us to get out and see what America means to the world. And we're starting a new period in our politics right now, and a fundamental discussion is, how much should America be involved in the family of nations? And I don't know, I've just traveled enough to know that if America knows what's good for America, we will not pull back from the rest of the world. Important things are happening, important challenges are being confronted, and the world admires American values. What America stands for, the values of American freedom and democracy, are shining inspirations on the hill, much bigger than any single president or administration. And I know with four years of President Trump a few years ago, America pulled back. And it was sorely missed by the rest of the democratic communities. And we've got an opportunity now to be at the table in the discussion, or to build up our walls and turn our back on the world. Things don't happen without American involvement on a vast scale. And I don't know what your attitude about that might be, but there's important things that need to be done within the other 96% of humanity, away from our borders. And we're wanted at the table. We're needed at the table. And if we know what's good for us, for stability, for our future, we'll understand that we need to be there. So that's my pitch for internationalism, and that's the sort of outlook of a European, and I think that's the outlook of most people who have traveled. When we travel, we realize that every society has its 4th of July, except it's on a different date. Switzerland, August 1st. Norway, May 17. France, 10 days after ours. Bastille Day, July 14. I love to be in different countries on their 4th of July. It's so much fun because it reminds me everybody has their own traditions and their own dreams. I love this thought that everybody does not have the American dream. These Sri Lankan people have the Sri Lankan dream. My Norwegian relatives have the Norwegian dream. My Spanish friends have the Spanish dream. We have the American dream. It's okay. It's different dreams. My parents taught me the work ethic. It wasn't a work ethic. My parents said, this is the work ethic. Well, actually, It's a work ethic. There are different work ethics. And in some countries, my son's in love with Colombian culture in South America. They have a different work ethic. I just met somebody who's decided to spend his life in Paraguay because he likes their work ethic, their tempo of life. You have that option. And Americans, we know how to work hard, that's for sure. But Europeans would say nobody ever goes to their grave wishing they worked harder. So we have these options, and there's not right and wrong. There's just different cultural approaches to things. And when we travel, we realize that people are struggling with different challenges. I love taking tours through Eastern Turkey. It's just a cultural scavenger hunt. We can learn so much from the complexity of that neighborhood, and it's certainly not Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. I was with a bus in Turkey a while ago. We were tooling around, not a list of famous sights to see in the shadow of Mount Ararat, but we were just looking on a cultural scavenger hunt for things to check out. We came to a high school stadium filled with kids having a pep rally. We parked the bus and went in, as we should. And there was 100 kids, high school kids in the stadium, all thrusting their fists up in the sky together and singing, "We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation." And I asked my guide, "What's going on? Don't they like God here?" And my guide said, "No, we love God, but considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism east of the border in Iran, we're very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state here in Turkey. And we're having a pep rally for pluralism, a pep rally for the separation of mosque and state." Whoa, I never even considered teenagers in a high school in Turkey celebrating the importance of the separation of mosque and state. That's the exciting thing about travel. It lets you know this world is a little more complicated than a bumper sticker. Now, a lot of people, they have a tough time grappling with that, but that's the exciting thing. I was in Afghanistan, backpacking through, when I was a kid. This is a long time ago. And a man sat down next to me at the cafeteria where all the tourists and the backpackers went, and he said, "Are you an American?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with spoon and fork like you do. A third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same." Oh, baby. He had a chip on his shoulder. And I thought, he's right. I thought less of him because he ate with his fingers. I love that sort of hard lesson you learn on the road. For the rest of that trip, I remember I did the best I could to eat with my fingers. And throughout South Asia, I found restaurants, the typical restaurants that the locals go to, had no spoons and forks. They had a ceremonial sink in the middle of the room. People would wash their hands and use their fingers for what God meant them to be used for, to nourish themselves. It's a beautiful thing. It became quite natural. In fact, I had to be retrained when I got home. Now, of course, we don't need to eat with our fingers when we get home, but it is interesting to know that for a lot of humanity, to stick a dirty metal utensil in your mouth with your food makes no sense at all. I love that. I really love that. You know, in the Bible it says, "Know thy enemy," and I think it makes a lot of sense. Some of my best travels, in fact, I would say my most impactful travels, have been in places where I'm really not supposed to go. Cuba, Iran, Palestine, Russia. Amazing places. Nicaragua, wonderful places to go that steal your heart. Anytime my government says I can't go someplace, I'm like a little kid. I'm just like, why not? I want to go there. There better be a good reason. Ha! Just an aside, that's probably one reason why I worked very hard to legalize marijuana. 12 years ago, we were the first state to legalize marijuana, and I was a sponsor of that bill and a leading spokesperson for it. And, you know, for me, high is a place, and sometimes I want to go there. My government said I couldn't go there. There better be a reason, and there's not. When we get out of our comfort zone, when we go to these places, it carbonates our life. It really does. Some of my most beautiful experiences have been recognizing the humanity of it. And also that makes me heartbroken. Right now in Israel and Palestine, it's a tough time. It's a heartbreaking time. And considering how the United States is funding much of the situation there, we're stakeholders. As an American taxpayer, I firmly believe that every bomb that drops and every bullet that flies that we pay for has our name on it, has my name on it, it has your name on it. And I need to take an interest in that. When there's a wall, there are two sides to a wall. I firmly believe that walls are tragic. Walls keep communities apart. And you can't understand a wall, whether it's a physical wall or a metaphorical wall, unless you talk to people on both sides of that wall. Here, a big wall separates the people of Palestine with the people of Israel. And you got to have a dual narrative approach to that travel. You got to talk to people on both sides, good Israelis and good Palestinians. We have a wall in our society today. It's a metaphorical wall between people in, what do you call it, blue communities and people in red communities. We got to talk to each other. The unintended consequence of this big wall in Israel, the intended consequences was to keep Israel safe from terrorists. Okay. The unintended consequence is it keeps the younger generation unable to talk to each other, so each of them are saddled with their parents' baggage. And that just perpetuates the problem, and that's what we're seeing today. Palestine. These kids in Palestine, there are 6 million Muslims in Palestine. And you can't wish them away. It's a complicated situation. Iran, it's a complicated situation. What do? Well, you go visit them if you can, if it's safe. I wouldn't go to Iran now, but there's times when it's safe to go to these places. You can go to Cuba if you want. You can go to, you can get out of your comfort zone. And those are some of the most rewarding travels. I will tell you, a lot of people are riddled with fear. When I started traveling, people said, bon voyage. Now what do they say? Have a safe trip. We'll pray for you. Hey, statistically, it's safer to travel now than it was back when people said bon voyage. And now we're saying have a safe trip. Fear is for people who don't get out much. The flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. I'm so committed to the value of travel, and I'm so concerned that we as a nation are riddled with fear. Who are the most frightened people? People without passports, buried deep in the middle of this great nation of ours, whose worldview is shaped by fear-mongering commercial TV news. Think about it. I'm not that afraid to travel. I see the world as filled with joy and love and good people. Of course, it's not La La Land. I mean, there's some bad apples and some serious problems, but generally, people want to live together. And if we can get to know each other, that's a good thing. When we travel, it makes it tougher for their propaganda to demonize us, and it makes it tougher when we come home for our propaganda to demonize them. The world becomes a better place. Yeah, I went to Iran. It was so exciting to go to Iran with my TV crew. It was complicated. We were scared at first. We almost left our big camera in Greece. Thank goodness we took our big camera in with us, because I've never been accepted and welcomed more warmly than I was on the streets of Tehran in Iran. I mean, it was really disturbingly friendly. There's a lot of traffic jams in Tehran. It's the city of 10 or 12 million people, and the traffic is horrendous. And a lot of times we'd be just stuck in traffic. I'll never forget once we were stuck in traffic, and the man in the next car asked my driver to roll down the window. He handed over a bouquet of flowers, and he said, "Give this to the foreigners in your back seat and apologize for our traffic." I don't know about Texas, but in Seattle where I live, that never happens. Later on, we were in another traffic jam, and my driver just blurted out, right out of the blue, it was just quiet, we're sitting there quiet, not going anywhere, and he goes, "Death to traffic." Death to traffic? I thought it was death to America or death to Israel. And he said, "No, right now it's death to traffic." So I said, "What's with that with you Iranians, saying death to everything?" And this is my driver. He's not highly educated. He doesn't speak English very well, but he's just a friendly guy. And he did his best to explain. He said, "Well, when something is out of our control and frustrating to us, we say death to that." Out of control and frustrating. And I thought, you know what he's doing when he says death to? He is translating damn. He's saying damn the traffic. And he's translating that in English because he wants to communicate that frustration in English. And he says death to traffic. Damn America. Damn Israel. Damn election fraud. Damn climate change. Damn Ayatollah. It's so complicated. It's more complicated than a bumper sticker. And when we travel, we're able to see that. We're able to see that. Have I ever thought, damn? Have I ever thought, damn those teenagers? Ha! Well, of course I have. Do I really want them to die and burn in hell for eternity, like I just said, if you take that literally? Of course not, but it's after midnight. Turn down the music. Damn those teenagers. Death to teenagers. So when we travel, we recognize that. And when we look at some hateful graffiti like this American flag with dropping bombs for stripes and skulls for stars that says down with the USA, you just got to think about that. I was there. Imagine walking under that hateful banner. Awkward, really awkward. And I just wanted to be mad at somebody, but then I remembered, wait a minute. Everybody on the street was born after that was painted. They live in a theocracy. They don't have the freedom to complain about that. And that just stays there because that's where the government wants it. I want to get to know the people because the people want to get to know us. And going to Iran, what an experience that was. And I'll tell you, they are saddled with baggage. Just like you and I are saddled with 9/11 baggage, just like our parents were saddled with Cold War baggage, and their parents were saddled with Depression baggage. Everybody's got their baggage. Why does Iran do the things it does? Well, it's complicated. And if you don't know Iranians, you don't know the story. If all you do is watch commercial news here in the United States, you don't know the story. What is the baggage of Iran? Well, in the 1980s, they lost over 1 million people in their war with Iraq. There was carnage on their Western Front, just like between France and Germany in World War I. And when you want to know what is on the mind of Iranians, you go to what's called a martyrs cemetery. Every town in Iran has a martyrs cemetery. And there you'll find widows, and there's 1 million of them, sitting cross-legged on the tomb of their son or their father or their husband, weeping and maybe cursing. And you wonder what's in their mind. They lost their loved one, and for 30 years they've been coming to that tomb and weeping every Friday. It's powerful stuff, and we got to understand. On my last day working in Iran, a woman came up to me and she said, "Are you an American journalist?" I said, "Yes." And she did this on my chest. She pointed and she says, "I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're strong, we're united, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears." I thought, wow, she's really trying to communicate something to me. What is egging this person? And then I thought about it. That is the base of the people who elect and put in power the Ayatollah and Ahmadinejad and so on. Who was the base that made the Islamic Revolution possible in Iran? Was it the sophisticates in the big cities that bragged the miniskirts are shorter in Tehran than they are in Paris? Or was it the small town parents? Was it the less educated fundamentalists in the small towns? People, good people, who were just riddled with fear and driven by love. That's what it is. She says she doesn't want her girl to be raised like Britney Spears. What does that mean? It means if we take over and put another Shah on the throne, they don't care about the price of oil. They don't want their girls to be hijacked and turned into boy toys, crass materialists, and drug addicts. They are victims of propaganda. They're victims of popular misunderstandings between countries. And you just don't want your girls to be swept away by American values when you think about, some pop star and drugs and sex and all that, if you are a small town fundamentalist. Who is the base that elected our next president? Small town fundamentalists, people who are less educated, good people riddled by fear and driven by love. Good people, afraid and motivated by love. This is a beautiful understanding. And when we travel, we connect. Muhammad said, "Don't tell me how educated you are. Tell me how much you've traveled." And when we travel, with our windows down, with our hearts open, we can look at these kids and see past their scarves. Look at those faces. I can't get enough of that. And I just hope and pray that they can be free. And someday they will be. But there's a lot of baggage, and there's a lot of reason that half of their society is afraid of incursions from the West. We've got twisted ideas. They've got twisted ideas. Let's get together and compare notes. Half of the world is trying to live on $5 a day. That's okay. That's just reality. Half of humanity, $5 a day. 10% of humanity is trying to live on $2 a day. That's not okay. That's what the United Nations calls extreme poverty. These are people who are hopeless. These are people who don't have the ability to raise their kids properly with education and hygiene and good nutrition. Now, we were beating hunger. In one generation, we cut hunger in half. And in the last decade or so, it's ticked up because of climate change, because of corruption, because of conflict, because of COVID. All the C's, the 4 C's. I made a TV show about the fundamentals of hunger. Why is there hunger in a world with so much wealth? It's structural. And I wanted to share my thoughts on that. And I went to Ethiopia and Guatemala, and I put together a 1-hour TV show. You can see all my TV shows for free on my website, by the way. My show on Iran, my show on Holy Land, my show on hope and hunger. And when we go to the developing world, when we go to the poor world, we think about the importance of accommodations, of a roof over your house. It's part of my work as a travel teacher. You need a good hotel. You need food. And when I travel, I like good food. Oh, but when we travel as an education to learn about structural poverty, we see people who will never have a name on a plane ticket. We see what the reality is when you're trying to live on $2 a day. A dirt floor, no chimney, a shack with a thatched roof filled with smoke, no running water, no electricity, no health care, no education. The average lot for women in this world is to walk every day for water and to walk for firewood. Abandoning their children, unable to raise their children in those critical first 1,000 days so they develop in a way that they'll be stunted for the rest of their lives. I've seen success south of the border. We're not asking for people to be big shots and rich. We're just asking for people to have $5 a day as farmers so they can have some education, have access to health care, and raise their kids to be healthy and productive. This is hopeful. And when we get out and travel and get to know the world, we understand that there is a value in soft power. There is a value in investing in these societies so that they can grow up not angry and hopeless and derailed, but working hard and staying on the land and contributing. This woman is not as old as she looks, and she is emblematic of the lot in life for women on this society. If you care about women's issues, and I do as a man, it's so important to understand what is the lot in life for women on this planet, what really matters. And one thing that really matters is poor women who have to leave their families every morning and walk for hours to get water and to get firewood. And their walk gets longer and longer every year. We can do something about that. We've got the wherewithal to bring water to these communities. Wow, a little bit of water, a little bit of education. Then you got bright eyes. You've got students and children that are going to go places. That should be the goal of America. That would make America great again. If we could help this world, overcome hunger and have a little more stability and not so many people leaving the farm to go to the big city and then trying to get into rich countries like ours. Wow. I've found in my travels that even if you're motivated only by greed, if you know what's good for you, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's not a nice place to raise your kids. If you don't know that, go south of the border. Go to Guatemala. In a middle-class neighborhood, everybody pools their resources so they can hire a guard like this so the kids can walk to the park safely. Go to Guatemala City. You're in a world where every bank, every pharmacy, every hotel has an armed guard. When our society has armed guards in front of the pharmacies and the hotels and the restaurants and the banks, you know the gap between rich and poor has gotten to the point where things are falling apart. And even if you're privileged enough to barricade yourself behind designer fortifications, that is a failure. You don't want to live in a society like that. We don't have to. We can make choices, that are ill-advised and based on misinformation and naive, uneducated voters. But if you don't address the healthiness of a middle class in a society that is struggling with a gap between rich and poor, good luck. And when you travel, you understand the humanity of it. Look at these beautiful girls. Look at these beautiful kids living literally on a garbage dump in some big city in Central America. They are just as deserving as our little kids. I'm a grandpa. Ha! This is Atlas, beautiful little Atlas. My daughter is so happy. I'm so filled with joy and thankfulness. And you'd think that would bring me back down to reality. No, that connects me with reality, with what's south of the border. And I know that as much as I love little Atlas, Atlas is no more deserving than this little child. And my love for Atlas and Atlas's mother's love, my daughter's love for Atlas is no greater, no more real than this parent's love for that child. This is a beautiful thing. And we got to remember, we Americans can be great again if we can help the world develop, have the dignity of water and education. And we don't need to do it because we love our neighbor. I know a lot of Christians talk about love your neighbor, but how do you vote? That's the question. You can do this because you believe in stability. It's amazing what soft power can do to make us safer. I'm fascinated by that. It cost $1 million a year to keep one extra soldier overseas. Now, I'm a realist about that. We need an army overseas. We need to have military power. But we need a military that makes us safer. And our defense budget should be calibrated and analyzed in a way that, are we really investing to make us safer? And what makes us more safer? One more soldier overseas, or take that money and drill 200 wells. $5,000 for a well. 200, I believe that's 200 wells for $1 million. Every soldier could be traded for 200 wells, and then 200 thirsty communities in ravaged communities in the poorest countries. Instead of mothers are the foundation of stability. Instead of them having to abandon their families every morning to walk for water, instead of them walking across the county for water, they walk across the square. And every morning when those mothers pump that water and beautiful life-giving water comes out, what are they going to think? God bless America. God bless America. All the mothers in 200 thirsty villages going to the well across the square to bring water to their families. And I'm not even talking about love your neighbor here. I'm just talking about a practical investment. To bring water to those communities would make you and me safer. It'll make the world of our children and our grandchildren more stable. And to me, that's soft power. Now, will that ever be taken seriously or thought about? I don't know. It's pretty tough. But right now, we risk having all of our smart development aid zeroed out because our society wants to make America great again. That's going to make America small again. So forgive me from broaching that issue, but we're going to be dealing with that. And I'm saying, even if you don't care about love your neighbor, of course this is love your neighbor, but even if you don't care about love your neighbor, you can make America safe by helping people develop and stay healthy and stay on the land south of the border. This is so exciting. When we travel, we learn. When we travel, we get connected with the world. And I was just learning this morning when I was talking to Karen about the Rotary Club. And I was thinking about the Rotary Traveler. If you're a Rotarian, I just love your mission and what you guys do. I'm so inspired by it. Well, here's, I think, what could be the Rotary Traveler. The Rotary Traveler: are my experiences the truth? Are my lessons learned fair to all concerned? Will my travels build better friendships and goodwill? Will the results of my travels be beneficial to all concerned? Man, those are words to live by, and they can apply to our travels as well. I just want to wrap it up with a beautiful, beautiful experience I've had in my travels as a tour guide, and it's a nice example of the value of travel. This is a whirling dervish, and he's a Muslim. And when I'm with my groups in Turkey, I'm just going to paraphrase this, but I had 20 people in my group in Turkey, and I want them to meet and get to know a dervish, not cruise ship entertainment like most tourists do when it comes to whirling dervishes, but an actual dervish. I find a guy and I say, hey, I'm a tour guide from America. I got 20 Americans in the hotel and we want to see a dervish whirl. Can we watch you pray? And he said, I'm not a photo op. I'm a monk and that's my praying. But if you let me explain what I'm doing, you can witness that. I say, great. Where? He says, sundown on my roof. Okay. We gather on his rooftop at sundown. He comes out dressed up like a monk. He says, Merhaba, welcome. I think I can stop sharing for this. And he says, I'm a dervish. For you Christians, I guess you'd call me a monk. My prophet is Mevlana. I think you call him Rumi. And he says he's like Saint Francis. It's the prophet that all Muslims can get their brains around, the prophet of love. And he says 5 times a day, I pray. I whirl myself into a meditative trance. And I'll go back to the dervish here. And he says, I plant one foot in my community and the other foot goes around and it celebrates all the diversity in God's great creation. I lift my hand, one to the sky, to our Heavenly Father, and the other one, like the spout on a tea kettle, goes down. And I meditate on the prophet Mevlana's teaching. And I want to be a conduit between the love of God and my world in this life. And I spin and I lose myself in a meditative trance, thinking, how can I be a conduit of God's love? As the tour guide, I watched him whirl, his head tilted over, his robe billowed out. Ha! And he lost himself in that beautiful thought. And then I looked over at my group and I thought, whoa, I saw the wonder sweep over their face. And I thought, this is good travel. My travelers, getting to know that whirling dervish, are going to go home a little less afraid, a little bit freaked out by a dervish, and they're going to be more connected with our world in many, many ways. And then if they can implement that broader perspective as citizens here at home in our great country, they're making travel a political act. And I think that is really more important than ever these days. So for thinking, what is the value of our citizenship? How can we contribute? How can we be Rotarians with a global viewpoint? Travel gives us a dual citizenship. It makes us more thankful for our American citizenship, and it gives us a global citizenship. And that's a citizenship that I treasure. All right, that in a nutshell is kind of my philosophy of broadening my perspective through travel. And I hope you found that interesting.
Well, we all found it, we're speechless. It was an incredible talk to Rotarians that you share so much in common with. And I don't even know what to say, but I am going to open it up to questions. At the bottom of your screen, you will find a little icon that says Q&A. I invite everyone to ask questions and we'll try to get through as many as possible. We have one, it's not really a question, but it says best presentation ever. So I certainly agree with that. So please feel free to go down to Q&A and ask your questions. And in the meantime, as we're gathering all that, I want to talk about a recent interview that Rick did with the New York Times. And it is available on YouTube. It's called The Interview. And if you just Google The Interview, Rick Steves, New York Times, you'll find it. But one of the things, Rick, that you said in that interview, and that's what you've been talking about, is you said it's a powerful thing when we become less afraid of each other. Mm-hmm. And that's deep and it's true. And talk a little bit about that.
Well, I just really analyze my own reaction to the world and other communities. And I'm afraid of things. And the things I'm afraid of, I don't know. I was afraid of going to India. And then I went there and it's my favorite country. I was afraid of Palestine. I was afraid of Cuba. I just feel like there was a time when I was afraid of gay people. The most understanding people when it comes to the gay community are people that have a family member who's gay, I think. We need to get to know things that we're uncomfortable about. We don't need to embrace it. We can choose to condemn it. But if we don't know it, I think we're just afraid of it. And that was my comment about a wall. I'm so committed to this idea of dual narrative travel, When you go to Ireland, there's a wall between the Catholic and the Protestant community in the north of Ireland. And the best kind of tours in Belfast are called dual narrative tours. You spend half of your day with a Protestant in the Protestant neighborhoods, and you spend half of your day with a Catholic in the Catholic neighborhoods. You hear both sides, and then you understand it's complicated. There's good people, and they're working it out. You see, I just think it is so constructive. But I am really determined not to let somebody else shape my worldview. People who let media shape their worldview are that's a pretty low bar. I like to have my own personal experience shape my worldview, and it helps me a lot.
This is a great question. It's from Chris. And she says, I love your perspective. How do you seek out these individual encounters when traveling? I love getting off the beaten path. The person encounters make travel. So she wants to know how does one do that?
Yeah, this is something that is a skill for travel. And some travelers are very docile and they will do the touristic things. They will do what everybody's doing on Instagram or what's number one on TripAdvisor. They will see the cultural cliches on stage and then go back to their hotel and talk with other Americans. Other people will go where the tourists don't go and connect with locals. You don't need to go to Russia or Cuba. You can go to Ireland or Scotland or Norway. And you can go to a pub where there's locals and not tourists, buy somebody a drink. One of my favorite things to do is in Italy. I go to a university town and I know where the kids are all hanging out having a spritz as the sun goes down. I'll find three or four students and I'll say, can I buy you all a spritz? They go, yeah. So it costs me $4 each. I spend 20 bucks. I got 5 spritzes. And then I've got these friends and I'm their window on the West. And I'm just from Seattle. You guys are from Texas. Now that's really interesting. You should play that card. You're from Texas. But if you don't get away from the tourists, and a great way to go is to the students because they speak English. Buy them a drink. You're the most popular kid on the block. And then they're going to ask you questions. They're going to say, what is that? What is it called? The electoral college. Yeah. The electoral college. That's a point of real confusion in Europe, and be prepared to answer those questions. And then you can ask them questions. I just love that. We have something on our tours. We take 30,000 people on our Rick Steves tours every year, 40 different itineraries, 1,200 different departures. And I just love it when our guides, and I've got wonderful guides. I've got about 150 European guides that do our tours. And we have something called reflections times, where we get together and just the guide is no longer the teacher. The guide, he or she, is the conduit between a local person and our group, and we share ideas. We'll sit in the city hall with a friend or a relative who's Norwegian, and we'll ask questions about how does it work in Norway? Why do you guys pay so high taxes? And why are you so happy? We can go to the Netherlands and we can talk to people about how they're dealing with climate change and what's with all these prostitutes. And, you can go to Spain and talk about all the immigrants that are coming in from Morocco and how are they dealing with that. There are so many things you can talk about as you get a situation where you can have those reflections. When you go to a bar and buy somebody a drink, it's a great opportunity.
Excellent question. We have another one. It says, what country, I think I know the answer to this, but what country outside of Europe, in your opinion, is a must see? That question comes from Patrick.
Well, I don't think there's any must see country. It's just you choose where you want to go. Do you want to go to Cancun or Mazatlan and call that travel? I know what it's like. I mean, I've been to Mazatlan and I've been burned out and needed time on a beach, and I'm just fantasizing about a pristine stretch of tropical beach swept free of local riffraff, just me and my privileged white friends on that beach. A plastic strap on my wrist where I don't even have to touch the local coins to get my margarita. And that's going to be a great vacation. But am I learning anything? Of course not. I'm just part of the problem. But if you just walk 6 blocks inland and get to know some local people who are serving all these tourists that jet in and out, you might find that interesting. You got to choose Mazatlan or Managua, And I don't think everybody wants to go to Managua instead of Mazatlan, but you have that opportunity And when serendipity presents itself, you really got to say yes. I just can't describe how thankful I am that I've had these experiences where I get out of my comfort zone and I'm not taking risks. I don't take risks in my travels. Some people are totally risk averse. Well, then you don't want to go to Chicago or New York or Washington, D.C. It's dangerous. Statistically, that's far more dangerous than the travel kind of stuff that I do. But we can travel in ways where we meet people. Right now, I'm in a recording studio. I'm taking a break from recording a 1 hour TV show we just produced about Poland. Talk about an interesting country. And we were just in Poland hanging out with people that really have a very good insight on the world and the world affairs right now because of where they live, right next to Russia, and because of their history. They were bombed out, at World War II. It's an amazing experience. But do you go to Poland and talk to people? Anybody could, or are you going back to Disneyland? So you've got to make these choices. You can have La La Land or you can have reality. Nothing wrong with La La Land, but if your whole worldview is shaped by La La Land, you can't teach me very much except about La La Land.
Yeah, I think I read or saw somewhere that you had planned a family vacation on a beach with the wristband with the margaritas, but you had an alternate opportunity to
You
go to
read the book. You read the book. Yeah, that's one of my examples. Very good, Karen. Yeah, I was going to Mazatlan with my family, and it was just what I explained. We typical beach, cheap Hawaiian vacation. And then I was really into Central America during the Contra and Sandinista times, and I was really an admirer of Archbishop Oscar Romero. And it was the 25th anniversary of the assassination of Oscar Romero. And my friend said, we're going to El Salvador and we're going to march with the locals to remember Archbishop Oscar Romero. And I told my family, I'm not going to be any fun on the beach. I've got to go down there and remember this amazing, community leader, Romero. But that's the kind of travel, that's a chapter in my Travel as a Political Act book. I should say, it's frustrating for me just to have an hour with your gang. And on my website, every TV show we've ever made, every talk I've ever given, it's all there. It's all free. So I've got 100 shows on Europe. I mean, cut Europe into 100 half-hour slices, and that's a whole coverage of Europe. But my favorite shows are the specials that I've made. The 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, Hunger and Hope, fascism, lessons we can learn from fascism in Europe 100 years ago, Palestine and Israel today, Iran, all of these shows that I've made. That's really where smart and caring people are steep on the learning curve. And I love to bring the experience of a traveler there for people who aren't fortunate enough as me to have traveled there. And also this very talk I gave just now, I kind of crunched it way down from the full talk that I give. And anybody can see that anytime just by going to my website and looking under the lectures section. You can go to school on all the stuff that we have at ricksteves.com.
Excellent. I have another great question. This one is from my friend Darby, and I'm not choosing it because she's my friend. It's just a great question. Darby would like to know, what trip was your awakening? Because obviously you've had an awakening. It happened a long time ago.
Right.
I hope everyone watching tonight has been on a trip and had an awakening like this. I know I have. It's a powerful, emotional experience. What was your awakening?
Well, I was pretty lucky, and it's Darby, thank you very much for the timely question because this is my newest book, On the Hippie Trail. And that was when I was 23 years old. I wrote a 60,000 word journal. It's like a 200-page book, and this is the journal. And and when the journal was written like this, and we have transcribed it, and it is now, like this. But this was my coming of age trip. It's the hippie trip from Istanbul to Kathmandu back in 1978 when I was 23 years old. That was my coming of age trip. This book is coming out in a couple of weeks. You can pre-order it anywhere you get your books. You can just ask for Rick Steves' new book, On the Hippie Trail. Istanbul to Kathmandu and the Making of a Travel Writer. 2 nights ago, I gave a 1 hour presentation on this trip on our weekly travel party that we have on Monday nights called Monday Night Travel. And we've got 150 of those hours cataloged and archived for people to watch anytime for free. And you could go on to Rick Steves, and right on the homepage, you've got Monday Night Travel, and I could take you on that trip. It's quite a fun trip down memory lane back when I looked like that. So, but that was my coming of age trip. But also I've had other trips that really broadened my perspective, and I'm just lucky. I'm a lucky guy that gets to travel for a living, and I've spent 100 days a year overseas, hanging out with other people. And when I come home, I'm happier than ever and more thankful than ever that I'm an American. But I'm also concerned about our place in the family of nations, and I'm keenly aware that we are 4% of the planet. And for me, the most beautiful thing, the thing I'm most thankful for, is when I come home, I am more enthusiastic about building bridges and less enthusiastic about building walls. I think we all want to be safe, and the best way for us to be safe is to build bridges instead of relying on walls. Because whether we like it or not, we're part of this family of nations, and we got to live together. And the existential challenges that are going to be confronting us in the future are ones that are not going to be win-lose. It's got to be win-win. We've got to work at it together. These challenges are going to be impervious to conventional weaponry and walls, and we need to have smart governance. We need to embrace science, and we've got to work with the family of nations, I think, just to be safe and for our kids to have a great place to enjoy this world as we have.
I think that is a beautiful place for us to part. I could sit here all night and drink wine with you and talk, and we had so many questions, and I'm so sorry we couldn't. Yeah, right here.
Well, thank you, Karen. And I admire what the Rotarians do. I love what my local Rotary clubs are doing. We've collaborated on a number of great projects, and your hearts are in the right place. You're all thought leaders in your own communities, and for us to expect the most out of our country, we need to have a country that we can be proud of. We need to have a country that has ideals. And these are complicated issues. And I know there's a lot of contention between people with different life stories and experiences. But if we can learn from our travels and come home and help make our country one that we are proud of, I think that's a very exciting thing. And for me, it's a real honor to be sharing my thoughts with you today. And I want to wish you all bon voyage, happy travels.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. And with that, and I do want a signed copy of that new book. Mr. Hippie, I will talk with your people because I know where to find you, but thank you so much for talking to our Rotarians. I know you touched our hearts because your philosophy is our philosophy and understanding people and helping them around the world. I'm going to throw this back to Kent.
Yes, fantastic. Yes, Rick, I want to thank you very much on behalf of the Lone Star Rotary E Club. A couple of things I want to kind of tie up at the end here. What I heard from Rick, and I made some notes. what I heard Rick emphasize tonight, Karen, and I think I understand the assignment you gave me, Karen. But Rick emphasized cultural understanding. You encourage travelers to step outside our comfort zones and connect with people of different cultures. That's a Rotarian philosophy. You've asked us to break stereotypes, challenge preconceptions by promoting openness. I appreciate that, Rick. You ask us to travel for good. View travel as a way to build empathy and foster peace, and Rotary's a peace organization. You've talked about sustainability and responsibility, advocating for responsibility in our tourism that benefits the local community. And then, with that, I'd like to, if I can, I think I can share the four-way test here. If I can do this, let's see if I can do this. Rotary has a four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. And I think Rotary, this really ties into your message as well. The four-way test of the things that we think, say, and do. First is the truth. Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And what I heard tonight, Rick, was you talked about truth and understanding. You highlighted the truth about cultures and challenging the biases that we may have. Look for the truth. You talked about fairness and justice in your presentation tonight, and you talked about equity and travel tourism practices that uplifts locals. Is it fair to all concerned? You also tonight, I heard you talking about goodwill and friendships. You talked about the fact that you're promoting friendships through meaningful cross-cultural connections. And that meets our third test. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And finally, the beneficial of all concerned. You believe that travel, or what I picked up tonight was that you believe that travel positively impacts both the travelers and the host communities. And so I really think that your presentation tonight was so much of a Rotary presentation. And Karen, you outdid yourself as you always do when you're program chair of bringing in great speakers. But Rick, I want to thank you for allowing our paths to cross. I do have one final question that Karen didn't ask, and I want to ask. I asked her to ask it, and what is your philosophy on solo traveling versus traveling with a partner or someone to share the experience with?
Yeah. Well, I think the loneliest people on the road are people who are traveling with the wrong partner.
Okay.
The happiest people.
I would agree with that.
And now I would rather travel with a partner, but I wouldn't compromise my trip to travel with the wrong partner knowingly. So I'd rather go alone. Most of my travel is alone because I'm busy working. So I spend 100 days a year in Europe and I'm alone. I connect with my local guide friends and so on, but I get my work done much faster when I'm alone. But of course, when I'm on vacation, I like a well-matched travel partner. And these are all good issues, and those are issues that we cover in our various ways. Hey, I want to thank you all. I mean, I've enjoyed this. I hope as much as all of you, and I hope our cross paths again. Okay.
I do too. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of the Rotary Club, Lone Star Rotary E Club of Texas, thank you, Rick. Thank all of our participants that participated in the seminar. I know we had over 100 that was on the webinar. This will be on our YouTube channel. Be posted probably tomorrow on the Lone Star Rotary E Club YouTube channel, and we'll be sending out a link to the district as well. But thank you, Rick. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, everybody.